Hi, and welcome to Studio SN. My name is Sara Naumann, and today I'm really excited to be a guest blogger over at PaperArtsy. And today we're going to be combining their Fresco Finish chalk acrylic paints with Eclectica stamps for card making techniques. And the Eclectica stamps that we're working with are some that I've designed just for PaperArtsy, so I'm really pretty excited to share those with you. So I hope when you get done watching today's segment that you get a chance to pop on by the PaperArtsy website. And they're over at paperartsy.co.uk. And do give yourself some time over there because they have a lot of really great resources to check out and lots of videos and blog posts. In the meantime, I hope you enjoyed today's segment on stamping with Fresco Finish paints and Eclectica stamps. I've been playing a lot lately with the Fresco Finish chalk acrylic paints, and I really love how easily they work as both backgrounds and for stamping. And on my card, you'll notice this really large double heart image. Well, that was stamped with Fresco Finish paint. And as well, my background is book paper that's painted with Fresco Finish paint. And the paint is a beautiful kind of chalky matte finish. And to accent that, I've also added some gold embossing here in the heart's focal. And I think you can also see my stamping here on the side on top of that painted book paper, as well as this really pretty script up here too. Super easy and a lot of fun, so let's take a look. I love to combine paints with stamping, and on this card I've used Fresco Finish paints to stamp and emboss. So I've got a lot of color and sparkle on this card. The combination of the Fresco Finish paint, glitter embossing powder, and Eclectica stamps. Super easy to do and a lot of fun as well. And I think you can see here on my background, this is paint and the glitter embossing powder, as well as here on my card focal. And I've also used the Fresco Finish paints here on this piece of book paper. So it's a really fun, loaded with color and sparkle type of card and very easy to do. So let's take a look. The first part of the card that I want to show you is actually a part that you can hardly see. It's this blue matting paper underneath all of my other layers here on my card. And this blue is Space Cadet. So this is the Fresco Finish chalk acrylic paint that I'm talking about. And you'll notice on here in little tiny letters it says opaque. And then you can see a little swish of that paint on the top of the label. Well, that just shows you the opacity of the paint. And I wanted to actually demonstrate the painting so that you can see how nicely it goes on. So I'm just going to bring in a piece of scrap paper and then a piece of kind of lightweight white cardstock. So working with my Space Cadet, I'm going to simply squeeze on a little bit of it, and then taking a flat brush, I'm just going to stroke this on. And I think you can see how thick, how opaque, and how matte this paint really is. So you don't need very much. As you can see, I can pretty much cover this whole piece of paper with just that little dollop of Space Cadet paint, and then kind of spread that out evenly. But I wanted you to see not only how easily it goes on and how easy it is to paint with it, but also really that beautiful opacity. It is thick and matte and really, really excellent coverage, which means, of course, that you don't have to use as much of that paint as you would with something that is really a much more watery type of consistency. So you can see how beautiful that is. Now this is it wet, and I wanted to bring in a piece of it dry so you can just see the difference between the two. Of course, this is shinier because it's still wet, but drying very quickly. And this is it when it's dry, completely matte, completely solid, and this was one coat of that Space Cadet, which, by the way, is a really beautiful color of blue, which is why I chose it initially. And I thought, oh, I just have to work it onto this card somehow. So I wanted to show you that with the opacity of the paints and just how nicely those go on and how little you actually need to get your painting done. Now the next thing I'm going to do is paint my book paper. So let me move aside some of my blue Space Cadet paper here, and I'm going to bring in a piece of just book paper. I just tore this out of a cheap paperback novel. And I'm going to knock back some of this text with another one of the Fresco finishes, and this is the vanilla. This is also opaque, and what I love is using this really soft vanilla yellow color with book paper, because book paper has a yellowish tint to it anyway, and then this will just help mute back some of those words so that I can go ahead and stamp onto it. So once again, I'm just going to squeeze on a little bit of the paint here. Of course, I can always add more, but you don't need a whole lot with this paint, as I think you can see. And I'm just stroking this on with another flat brush. And this brush is actually a really nice flat brush. This is from Plaid. So any kind of brush will do, but I really like using a flat brush for this technique. It just really spreads it on a little bit more easily. So here we go with our vanilla, and you can see it knocks back the text, but it doesn't have such a high contrast with the rest of the book page. So that border around the outside still really shows up nicely, and then still kicks back some of those words so that you can go ahead and stamp on it. So I'm going to bring in a piece that's dry, move this piece out of the way, and go ahead and stamp on this. Now, the stamps that I'm working with are, of course, the Eclectica line from PaperArtsy, and this is the ESN11. You can see those great big pretty hearts that are on the front of my card. And the stamps that we're going to use for the background paper are this border and this script. And I really like combining stamps that have very fine detail, as well as stamps that are a little bit heavier visually. And that's how I think of them, because there's a lot of black on here. It's quite bold in contrast to this really lovely, very delicate script pattern. And of course, you can see on here, you've got the little crosshatch, some more ledger, a snippet of ledger paper, my heart, and then two really wonderful quotes. And I really couldn't decide which one of the quotes to use, but I had to go with this one in the end. So let me grab my script stamp and my border stamp and get those inked up and ready to go. So here's my border stamp, and the ink that I'm working with is Jet Black Archival. This is Ranger's ink. And this is going to be really nice for stamping on the Fresco Finish paints. It's one of the best ink pads that I found for this. So I'm just going to go ahead and ink up my stamp, taking the ink pad to the stamp rather than the other way around. That's usually what I do. And then just turn it around and place it down here along on the side. Give nice, firm, even pressure, and look how beautifully that comes off. It's crisp, it's dark, the paint doesn't overtake it, the ink doesn't overtake the paint. It's a really nice balance. So then I can go ahead and ink up my script stamp as well. I'll just tap that on there. I love this script stamp. It's so nice as just for little snippets of text. And let's make sure it's reading the right way. And then I'm going to pop this one here in the upper corner. I love it. I love how crisp and detailed that is, even on top of the paint, even on top of those other words. But you can see where we're already creating layers of dimension with that paint and the words, and then these words running the opposite way. So we have lines going this way, lines going this way. And what I like about this too is that I've actually created a frame, as you can see, for the piece that I'm going to be putting here in the center. So then I just need to let the ink dry on here, and then I can come back for the next step. I'm ready to do my card focal on here. It's this really nice big heart design. And you'll notice that I've stamped it in red, and that's the Fresco Finish. And this is the London Bus. And London Bus, unlike the Space Cadet, which was opaque, London Bus is translucent. And you can tell that because, of course, it says that it's translucent, but also because there's a little swipe of paint on here. And you can, of course, see the lines that are printed on the label underneath. So it's a really good way, just at a glance, to tell what that actual color is going to look like. But this is one of my favorite colors, by the way, the London Bus. I think it's beautiful. So first I'm going to move aside my card and move in a piece of scrap paper with my piece of cardstock. And this is what I'll do my stamping on. And I'm also going to bring in my palette. This is a coffee can lid. So this is going to work as my palette. And I just need to squeeze a little bit of the paint on here. I don't need to have a whole lot for this. And I'm going to use a cosmetic wedge, one that is obviously pretty well used. This is what I'm going to use to spread out my paint on my palette and to ink up my stamp, if you will. So I have my stamp mounted onto the block. So it's two of the hearts together plus some of that script and a little bit of texturing on there as well. And I'm going to take the cosmetic wedge and use this as my applicator. It's a lot easier to apply the paint this way than, for example, to try and paint it on with a paintbrush, or to sort of dip the stamp into the paint. It's probably not the best idea. So I'm just going to tap this on here. Don't need to overload it. And then simply get my paper here. I'm going to stamp this up kind of toward the top and over to the side so I have room for my quote on there, and then simply press and lift, and you can see how that design comes out. And the red is just beautiful. It really emphasizes the scratchy kind of distressed look around the outside of those hearts. So then the next thing I'm going to do is add my little crosshatch design on here. Same process. Just go ahead and get this painty, tap that on there, and then put this on. Let's see if I remember how I did it. Slightly overlapping. So just to give another little focal piece on there as well. Now you'll notice on my original card that I've got some spattering marks around here. I think you can see it definitely down here and then around here in this open area. And that is also the London bus, but I've watered it down a little bit and just spritzed in a bit of water here. And then using a stipple brush, I'm just going to pick up a little bit of that paint. And then I'm sure you know this technique. You just run your finger on it to give a spatter effect. And you can get a fine effect by going really close, or you can get bigger dots by getting it more watery, and you can spatter as much as you like. And then that's the finishing touch on this. And then I just need to let this piece dry, and then I can come back and add some embossing. Before I get started on the next part of this technique, I really need to make sure that all of my paint has dried, because I'm going to be working with some embossing powder. And of course the embossing powder can stick in wet paint. So I need to make sure that my heart is all dry and my spatters are all dry before I get started on this. And I want to add a little bit of gold sparkle here just to highlight the center of each of these hearts. So I'm working with a Wow embossing powder, and this is the metallic gold rich. And then I also need to have my watermark ink pad, or my embossing ink pad, and I'm using the Versamark for this. I need a tissue, or in this case a dried out baby wipe, something with which to apply my ink. And of course I've got my scrap paper on here as well. So what I'm going to do, oh, look at the state of my embossing ink pad, that's shameful. It's gotten a little bit well used, I guess you could say. So I'm just tapping in my tissue in here, and then I'm going to tap some of that ink onto my hearts, just in the center, really lightly. And then put the lid on this before I really embarrass myself. And then come in with my embossing powder, and then just simply sprinkle this in the center where I've kind of a random pattern where I've got that ink on there. And then I'm going to simply tap that off, and I would go ahead and heat set that. So my embossing powder has stuck in the center of those hearts, and then when I heat set that, of course, I will get something that looks like this. So you can see as I'm wiggling this, the color and shine of that gold embossing powder in there really just accents those hearts really nicely. And also I think coordinates with the vanilla of my background paper here, and then also contrasts really nicely with my Space Cadet that I just had to use someplace on that card, even if it was just for the background. And for the rest of the card, I've stamped "A loving heart is the truest wisdom" from Charles Dickens, and that's of course also on the stamp set, and just stamp that with jet black archival. I have a little bow tied in a piece of the gingham ribbon that I seem to be addicted to, and that's just glued here to add a little bit of texture. And then reinforcing the frame design here on my card, I've added 4 little buttons, and those are just glued right onto the front of my card. So this is how you can combine stamping and creating backgrounds with Fresco Finish paints and Eclectica stamps. I want to say a really big thank you to everybody at PaperArtsy for always providing such amazing materials to work with. Amazing and addicting, I think I have to say. I really hope everybody gets a chance to stop by their website at paperartsy.co.uk and give yourself a little bit of time. You might want to pour a cup of tea while you look through all of the fabulous resources and videos that they have available. And of course, take some time to check out their Fresco Finish paints and of course the Eclectica stamps. I really hope you enjoyed today's show. For more ideas and inspiration, you know you can always come by my place at saranaumann.com. And if you enjoyed today's video, I invite you to subscribe to Studio SN on YouTube, and I will keep you updated with a new video every Wednesday. Thank you again for joining me on Studio SN, and I will see you again